Hello everyone, my name is Willem Standaert. I'm an assistant professor at HEC Liège and I'm presenting joint work with Céline Decoster from Ghent University. The title of our work is Collective Intelligence in the Context of Sports Performance Evaluation. So let me introduce what that means. We talk about the context of sports and more specifically gymnastics. So in gymnastics, it's a sports where judges play an important role because they evaluate the different gymnastics and their routines. Now that is prone to human error, and I will get into that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. But what we are looking at is the context where artificial intelligence-based systems are used, and it becomes kind of a collective intelligence decision what the score is of the different athletes. Now it was planned to be used at the 2020 Olympics. Now it will be the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo. And we are considering, or we believe it may have an impact on multiple stakeholders, not only the judges and their decision making, but also the gymnasts and the training that they do, so with their trainers. And then the third, also spectators, and related to that, the media attention, as well as sponsors' attention. So really, it seems to be a potential game changer for this sports, and maybe for other sports as well, and in other contexts as well. So what are some issues with human judging? First of all, it takes a long time. So there's several people that look at the routine and then need to come up with a score. And usually there's a lot of discussion going on before they end up giving this final score. There's also contextual factors. So the judge may not have the best viewing position on the specific routine. There may be a lot of distance, which makes it harder to really see very good how it was executed. And lighting issues might also play a role. Then there's also really individual factors. So as I said, these competitions, the evaluation takes a long time, and therefore the competitions sometimes take very long, up to 12 hours. And so the judges become a little bit tired and their concentration declines. And then there's a whole host of potential biases, which I will get into next. First one is repetition bias. So an athlete that is usually doing very good can be expected to have a higher score with the same performance. There's also a nationality bias, which is that if there is a judge of the same nationality, they may favor a specific athlete, or let's say a friendly country, such as neighboring country. Then there's a serial position, which is related to also the length of the competition, because what they say is that when you come very early in you do your routine early in the competition, you're likely to be judged more strictly than someone later in the competition. Related to this, there's also a sequential bias or anchoring bias, meaning that a specific performance early on anchors the evaluation of the judges later on, meaning that it's actually becoming a relative score rather than an absolute score. And then finally, conformity bias, which is more what happens in the let's say the panel of judges, where they're seeking for a specific convergence on a score, and so there might be some conformity going on. Now let's look at whether this is in fact a good setting to introduce some AI-based decision-making, and we're leveraging Shrestha's different conditions for decision-making and apply that to the gymnastics context. So first of all, the specificity of the search space. And here we can say there is work to be done, but in fact the idea would be that everything can be fairly well determined about how specifically you can evaluate a gymnast. Second, interpretability. That's where currently there is a big issue, because the judges come up with a specific score, but it's not always very clear why that score was valid for the specific routine. Then size of the alternative set. So here there's many actually routines or let's say elements that an athlete can perform, but it's still feasible. It can be captured in a decent amount. Decision-making speed. This is paramount. So here is where the human judges do take a lot of time, and then replicability of outcomes. there it's really crucial that the same routine in a certain situation should have the same score in another situation. And that's where, again, because of the biases of humans, we may not have that. So these criteria would actually indicate that AI would be a good solution, because if you can specify the search space, if interpretability is important here, if the size of the alternative set is large, speed of decision making is important, and replicability of outcomes is important, AI would be a good solution to introduce. So let me get a little bit more into how evaluation happens at the moment. So the final score is in fact a combination of the difficulty evaluation and execution evaluation. So you see an example on this slide. Now, the idea would be, in fact, you could look into using AI for both making up or developing the difficulty and the execution score. The difficulty is based on recognizing what specific element is being exercised, and then the execution is actually based on a deduction of errors, let's say, made relative to the perfect 10 points. So that's why you see the D score is a sum of different elements, so how difficult your exercise is. And then the execution score, it starts with 10, and then there are some tenths of a score deducted to end up with a final score, which is actually the sum of the D score and the E score. So the initial system that is now proposed or developed by Fujitsu, the Japanese company, is mostly looking at the D score, so the difficulty. And what they're using is 3D laser technology, such that they can recognize the movement of the body, right? So there's no markers on the body. It's really based on depth and sensing of the body in the space. Then that is processed to really make it into specific, based on the joints and the position of the joints in time. They recognize or try to match that with a database of elements. So the elements are the different type of movements that the athlete does. And then they find a match, meaning that based on what is done and what they have in the database, they look at the match such that they know what element was actually executed and that they give a difficulty score for that element. So again, the system is mostly used for the difficulty assessment, and the actual execution assessment at this point would still be done by humans. So that's why it becomes a collective intelligence type of decision. And so we see a couple of interesting research questions unfolding, and actually for multiple stakeholders. So the primary effect that is going on, we believe, is the fair process effect, which is that because you can eliminate bias and the decision-making process becomes more transparent, there can be positive outcomes for multiple stakeholders. And so looking at multiple stakeholders, who are they? So the judges, and you see a couple of detailed questions here that we want to look into. So it is, how is their task changing and how do they feel about that? Do they fear that in the end their job might be at stake and they're completely replaced by an AI system? Will they be able to interpret the output of the AI system? So can they actually interact with it? And then will they be able to keep up with the pace, meaning that the fast decision making, they will also need to be fast, otherwise maybe you're introducing something that makes the process even longer. Then for the gymnasts and the coaches, so how could the system actually help them perform better? Also, can the detailed system help them train in new ways, make their training methods better? And then finally, for spectators, the question is if this data that is now generated, if it can be used to make the competition more attractive, both let's say in a spectator experience in the stands, in the arena, as well as from home, because as you may know, gymnastics is actually a sport that really suffers from a lack of attention in between Olympic years. So these are a couple of the research questions that we outline and hope to answer through this research project. So with this, I would really like to thank you for your interest in this research, and please do not hesitate to reach out in case you have questions or comments for us. Thank you.